not everybody is truly capable of coming to the truth about complex topics. That is true, and that can be true, and yet it can also be true that it is a essential pursuit, that it is an essential pursuit. And while, yes, people can get misled and believe crazy things if they just kind of headbutt their way into complex fields, it is also true that if we create a society and a culture where we basically socially penalize people for doing their own thinking about things and questioning topics and views, that is equally, if not more dangerous. It is more dangerous. And it creates just a terrible system there. And so, Bitcoiners I see as people that are willing, there's that image of like one person standing against the crowd being like, yeah, you're all wrong. They're the person that's willing to say that, for better or worse.
Greetings and salutations, my fellow plebs. My name is Walker, and this is the Bitcoin Podcast. The Bitcoin time chain is 836399, and the value of one Bitcoin is still one Bitcoin. Today's episode is Bitcoin Talk, where I talk with my guest about Bitcoin and whatever else comes up. Today, that guest is Steven Lubka. Steven works at Swan, but you probably know him as a sunshine and walking maximalist with outstanding posture. If you don't know Steven, you're about to get to know him during this episode. We talk about sunshine, naturally, happiness, the intersection of money, culture, and law, reality, the nature of truth, and a whole lot more. I recommend that you listen to this show while walking outside in the sun, if possible. Before we dive in, I'm pleased to announce a new partner for the Bitcoin Podcast, Cloaked Wireless. They're a privacy and security-focused wireless service built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners, giving you nationwide 5G and the nation's best protection against SIM swap attacks, which are honestly getting out of hand. Go to cloakedwireless.com and use promo code WALKER for 25% off an eSIM or physical SIM plan. You can pay in fiat or in Bitcoin. And remember, not your keys, not your phone number. And if you're enjoying the Bitcoin Podcast, please subscribe wherever you listen or watch, and share an episode you find valuable on Nostr or Twitter. I'm a one-man show trying to build out another fucking Bitcoin podcast, and the best way you can support this show is to share it with your friends, family, or strangers on the internet. You can also support this show by going to bitbox.swiss/Walker and using promo code Walker for 5% off the fully open source Bitcoin-only BitBox02 wallet, or go to cloakedwireless.com and use promo code Walker for 25% off their SIM cards. As always, you can watch the video version of this episode on Rumble, YouTube, or X by searching at Walker America, or listen on Fountain.fm or wherever you get your podcasts by searching for The Bitcoin Podcast. Or just go to bitcoinpodcast.net to get all the links. If you listen to the Bitcoin Podcast on Fountain, which I recommend, consider giving the show a boost or creating a clip of something you found interesting. And if you are a Bitcoin-only company interested in sponsoring another fucking Bitcoin podcast, hit me up on social media or through the website bitcoinpodcast.net. Without further ado, let's get into this Bitcoin talk with Steven Lubka. Now we're good. Now we can truly speak freely. By the way, it looks so much nicer and sunnier there than it is here in the Midwest, I've got to say.
You got to move to Florida, man.
I know. I know. Where, without doxing yourself, where you are in Florida, is it painfully humid, though, for most of the year?
I don't experience it that way. So the thing
is that just because you've attained a different level of consciousness? You're like, I don't experience humidity.
Yeah, maybe a bit. Like I've adapted to it a bit, but like the thing to understand it, but the thing people don't get about Florida, in the winter, it's dry. Like ish. It's dry-ish. Like it's not dry like Arizona, but it's not humid at all. 60 degrees. In the spring, it's relative, like it's dry right now, 70 degrees, 75, 80, beautiful. In the fall, it's relatively dry, 75, 80. And then in the summer, it's hot and humid. but like it's hot and humid in New York in the summer, you know? It's like you're
Yeah.
not going to escape that. It's not as like hot as people make it out. It's you'll probably get an extra 5 degrees off New York, you know, like hotter in Florida. But my God, it's beautiful year round.
I mean, that is a pretty solid sales pitch, I'll say.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, and just the fact that you're able to experience sun essentially all year long. And that was Carl and I were living in Vegas to test it out for a
Yeah.
little while until we found out we were going to be having a kid. Then we were like, maybe we should move near the grandparents.
Sure.
But that was my favorite part was you're in the middle of quote winter and
Yeah.
I can still walk outside barefoot and get some sun on my bare chest. And
Exactly.
it's just glorious. Like
Yeah.
I'm starved for sunlight. Right before this call though, I did walk outside because it's halfway decent today. I walked outside,
Yeah.
stood barefoot in the grass, took some deep breaths as I drank some sunlight because that was the only way I knew how to get in the right mental frame for this call. You
It
know,
was the right move, man. It was the right move. But
and
it's
I feel better.
yeah, you feel better. It's a giant ball of hot, good mood in the sky. Like you gotta take advantage of it. Um, but no, it like that was the thing for me. Like I grew up north. Like I grew up in New York for a while. I've lived in Florida for a long time, but as a kid, I was in New York. I've lived in Michigan. I've lived like I know winter. It's not even the cold, it's the dark. Like it's the dark that's killer. It's like I can deal with whatever. You put a jacket on, like whatever, it doesn't matter. But it's like you have like 6 hours or something of sunlight some days and there's just no getting around that. It's I looked at it like the move south was like getting 30% of my year back is what it felt like. Like time. Like you can't put a price on that.
It is
But
so true.
being around family when you're having family, I mean, that is one of few legitimate reasons that like some people are like, oh, my job, my this, my that. It's like, okay, man. But no, I mean, congrats, by the way.
Thank
And
you.
you know,
Yeah, it's definitely a good read. Like the winter is worth it, and he was born in the depths of it. So I
yeah,
like to think he'll be very hot blooded in a good way. Because if you're
yeah,
born when it's cold, like you have to be a little bit hot blooded, I think. But
absolutely.
yeah, it is funny. Like the idea of it as winter is kind of losing time, and I agree. It's not the cold. The cold's never bothered me. I was like a cold weather athlete.
Yeah,
That's fine. It's a matter of everything is gray or dark and there is no escape from that. You can't turn
yeah,
off the sun. If you're in the sun, you can go find shade if you need it. If you're in the shade, you can't go find sun.
exactly.
It's kind of
Yeah,
a one-way street there.
yeah. You can bundle up, you can cool down, you can avoid too much sun, but you can't make sun where there's no sun. And it's just, and it has such a greater impact on, it's not just like, oh, I don't know, it's dark or your mood isn't the same. It's your energy, it's your focus, it's your whole like vital forces, right? Like your thumos, your whole like fire in the belly just gets completely changed. And there's something to the seasons, right? But you get that here. You have light cycle variations. It gets, I mean, it was 40 degrees at night during the winter here. You get some of that seasonal change. It doesn't
I
just feel like a block.
I feel like the seasons thing is it's almost just like a northern climate cope. It's like, well, we have the seasons. I mean, wouldn't want to give those up. And meanwhile, you're sitting there in the depths of winter, snowed into your house.
Yeah.
It's cold, it's dark, there's no sunshine. They haven't seen the sun in days. The clouds are too thick. And you're like, well, we have the seasons at least. So take
Yeah.
that, everyone who has sun right now.
It reminds me of that meme of it's like two people talking and it's their portfolio returns and the one on the left is like you'll really be fucked when the music stops and their portfolio is up 6% and the guy they're talking to is up like 300% for the year and they're like okay like oh well, you guys don't have the season. Okay, I hear
Right.
you. It's beautiful in March here, and I was in a t-shirt in December. I guess I don't have the seasons.
You've got me there. And that
Yeah.
meme, I'm pretty sure, is just like gold bugs versus Bitcoiners to
Yeah.
a certain extent.
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is, I mean, you understand their cope at this point. I mean, Bitcoin did, I thought it was dead today, to be honest. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
my goodness, it's only up like 160 some percent in the last year. So,
Dude, I mean, it
ooh,
almost dropped like 15% from the all-time high record. Everyone was in profit. Like you had a 15, like wow. I mean, how do you do it?
it's crazy to me how short people's memories are,
Yeah.
whether it be on purpose or uh, just because it's a function of their fiat mindset. But
Yeah.
just looking out at the day, at the week, at the month, I mean, at the year even, and perhaps I think it's a function of what Bitcoin does to you mentally, but also like now I'm a father.
Yeah.
And so I have this whole new appreciation of low time preference. It's not just building for me, for the future, for myself, and for Carl. It's like we have an offspring now for whom
Yeah.
we are responsible, and he's going to outlive us by a long shot.
Yeah.
And so that just makes you think like truly multi-generational. Like, how am I going to think about this? Not just, again, day, week, month, year, like halving cycle, decade, century. Like let's scale this out a little bit. And there's a sense of calm that I think comes when you start thinking in those types of time frames.
Absolutely. I think it unplugs you from this almost like desperate sense of the next, the next, the next, the immediate. There's almost a level of like, it's like a desperation that is there where like you have no like anchoring in something which is not just that surface volatility, be that of an asset or be that of life or be that of whatever it is. And it's I'm the first to kind of poke a little bit about like against oh, this is just fiat this, fiat that. Like I think the metaphor is abused and it loses intelligence and meaning. It's over applied. But what I will say is the sort of like fiat like short term, you know, like mentality. I mean, it's destructive, right? Like as a society, like we need to regain that longer term time horizon, like longer time preference. Like that is critical. And like we can't continue to in our personal lives or in socially like just the next quarter, right? The incentives break, like, and that is just absolutely true.
It is funny. I mean, you just think about, because I agree, and I'm also guilty of abusing the
It is
that's
fine.
so fiat.
It's fine. Like it's
Most
not
of
a
the
big
time purposefully so,
yeah.
but it presents an opportunity for so many good memes, and
Yeah,
who would
yeah,
I
yeah.
be if I turned down a good meme opportunity? But it is funny. I think that it's dangerous to put people into any sort of discrete categories in general, to say
Yeah.
that this person is just a fiat person, this person is a Bitcoiner, because we know that there is a huge spectrum of human experience that goes into everyone.
There's a
Even in
fiat person inside all of us.
right, sad. We're trying to kill that person. Like inside of you are two wolves. One is a Bitcoiner,
One
one
is
is a
fiat,
fiat.
one is a
Yeah, and
Bitcoiner.
the Bitcoiner wolf hopefully eats the fiat wolf, and then mates with its mate and produces. I don't know. Now we're getting dark, but I think that
You have
one way.
one kid, and all of
Yeah.
a sudden,
Everything's about that now. But no, I do think it's helpful to break things down just in terms of, I think there is if I can misuse or perhaps use correctly the fiat again, there's a Bitcoin optimism and there's a fiat nihilism that I think you
yeah,
see. And that's sort of how I've started to look. And not that all of us, again, are not guilty of occasionally perhaps seeming a little nihilistic in the way that we discuss the ills of the fiat world. But ultimately, the Bitcoiners that I meet, yourself very much included, and all those that I've had the pleasure of meeting, are so incredibly optimistic about the future. And you don't see that same sort of just
yeah,
almost ruthless optimism hardly anywhere else. It's always, yeah, we talk about the problems, but we do it in the context of this is why this solution can actually, Bitcoin fixes
Yeah.
this. Instead of just, here's the problem and we're going to blame the other out group
Sure.
within our society.
Sure.
I don't know. How do you think about that? Just like, and has that been your experience too with just, it's optimism to a fault with Bitcoiners, it seems.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think, and I think there's really interesting angles on kind of both of those. Like, what is it about kind of fiat or just modern society that is so nihilistic, and how does that show up? And also, like, what is the optimism that you're pointing at in Bitcoiners? I think both of those are fascinating. The modernity one, call it fiat, call it modernity, whatever it is. I think it's, and the only reason I kind of like needle on the fiat word is because it almost implies that fiat was the cause of whatever that thing is. And I think that that can be true, that cannot be true, or that can be partially true. But I think particularly when we're talking about this sort of like modern nihilism, it is interwoven, I think, in a lot of things. I think there's many, many components there. And but it's deep and it's true, and like that observation is right on the money. Like that is true about how this world out there. There is a deep, deep current of like nihilism and like atheistic reductionism. And I don't mean that to say like, oh, like whether the Christian God is, real or not real, but I mean this almost like metaphysical atheism where it's just materialism. Like the only thing which can possibly exist is just these discrete forms, this gross matter. And any sort of argument to the contrary is like airy fairy, nonsense, that there's no substance there. And I take issue with that so heavily because it is utterly unprovable. Like it is utterly, wholeheartedly, substantially, you cannot prove that. It's this widespread assumption that is passed off as fact, that the only thing that exists is matter, is this discrete stuff. And you die, you're dead, it's all, nonsense. Um and so this kind of like ideological current, right? Like it runs through the world, and it just dismantles everything. It dismantles the values. It dismantles anything which transcends, anything which has higher purpose, anything with that organizes, that inspires, and it reduces it all down to like meaningless atoms, particles, brain signals, neurochemicals. You don't actually love your partner. You're just having oxytocin go on in your brain. Like you don't actually, you don't even see your child. That's just a hallucination of, brain currents, and it's all fake and it's all constructed, right? And you piece apart this ideology, and it's more nihilistic than I think anyone can even like you can't even comprehend the depths and the just the tragedy of this profound, this all-encompassing nihilism. It is the reduction of everything. It's miserable. It's utterly miserable. And it's actually funny. I think this almost was manifest in a recent kind of Twitter. I don't know if you saw this. It wasn't really in Bitcoin world, but people were debating about Dune 2, the second Dune movie. And part of the like Dune story, the author Frank Herbert, he talked about this. It's true to the book in many ways. Like you have this kind of messianic figure in Paul Atreides. But the book is kind of about the dangers of messianic figures. You're not really supposed to like it's supposed to be a warning about him. But everyone walks out of that movie like that was the sickest shit I've ever seen, cosmic jihad. And like Herbert had to deal with this, that everyone liked the character that was supposed to be a cautionary tale. And it speaks to, I think, this theme where like people want this flattened, reduced, castrated secularism. And yet as humans, we're just so there's just this deep hunger for, why do people like Paul in Dune 2? Well, it's destiny. It's a mission. It's a purpose. He's chosen. There's suddenly this inspirational thing, and rather than disparage that and try to like filter it through this deep like nihilism, uh what if we paid more attention to that? What if we looked at like, why is it that people have this deep hunger for something to believe in? And I kind of went off on a tangent with this, but like that brings us back to Bitcoin in some ways and the optimism of Bitcoiners, right? Like, because I think what Bitcoin is for many people is I mean, Michael Saylor says this, it's hope, right? It speaks to that. You want to believe in something. You want to be on the side of something. You want to be like, this thing is good and I'm going to fight for it. And this other mindset is like, but how can we really know if it's good? It's really beyond our, what is good? What is good? How, you can't know. Like, it's wild.
It's funny. It's funny too, because I think that there's this, I agree with you that people will always, there is a deep, deep hunger for meaning,
Yeah.
for purpose, for things to somehow make sense, even if that is not consciously stated.
Sure.
It is subconsciously present in all of us. And when you have something that you are, quote, fighting for, or something, to put it another way, something that you are running toward versus something that you are fleeing from,
Yes.
it is always more powerful to run toward something because you
Yes.
know where you're going.
Yeah.
If you're fleeing from something, all you know is you're trying to get away from it.
Yeah.
You don't know what your destination is. You don't know where you are going. But it's going to be better than whatever you're running away from. Sure, of course, right? It must be. It can't possibly get any worse. But when you're running towards something, you're able to be optimistic.
Yeah.
I think. And that's the key thing that Bitcoiners have is, yes, we know there's a problem. There's something that we could just be blindly running away from in the dark, not knowing what direction we're going. But we're all going in, though we come from very different places and with very different motivations for why we are running in this direction. We're all running in that same direction. And I think that's what gives it power. That's what gives any movement power, right? And that's to, you go on the, let's say, to take the political ideology, because politics has become the ideology. It has become the meaning, the purpose for so many in our society, which is really sad and destructive, because that gives them something that they're not ever really, they think they may be running towards something, whatever the ideas of their color team are. In America, it's the blue or the red team. Well, the blue team, we've got the best idea. But really, all politics comes down to not stating why your own ideas are good and how you will accomplish them, but why the other guy's ideas are so bad and so dangerous, and why everyone should flee that. Yeah. So it's setting people up mentally to be in that position of running away from something without ever giving them something to run toward. And
100%.
I'm sure it's a frustration for you, and well, I know it is for me and for many Bitcoiners. You see all these political, and I'll just lump them in as political conversations, let's say on Twitter. And so many of them, again, are this exact same kind of dichotomy that we're discussing, where it's, one side bad, one side good. And that perspective just depends on which side you are on. And they talk about these problems, but they never talk about the problem or the problems. They never talk about what's at the base layer of these issues. And so many of these conversations just seem so futile because they're really just sensationalist propaganda meant to get you to run away from something toward an unknown something that has yet to be defined, but is purportedly better than whatever you're running away from. And I can see why you would be nihilistic if that's all that you had going for you was running away from something. Yeah. I don't know.
The concreteness matters. Like it's so two things on what you said. One is like, you can't just be against stuff, right? And that's so much of what you're talking about is you have people that are just like, they're just against things. They're opposing things. They know what they don't want, but they don't know what they want. And the problem with that is it's fundamentally non-generative. There's nothing to fight for. You can only fight against. And it's hollow and it's disempowered. And I think it's why, like, I've always argued like you need to be for something. It's deeply psychologically necessary. If you occupy this position of just being against whatever, you lose yourself in the process. You lose your vitality. It's why so many of these like kind of like belligerent like Bitcoin critics, I think seem so hollow. So like David Gerard and some of these types that it's like their entire brand, their entire reality, everything they've poured their life force into has just been opposing this one thing, critiquing this one thing for 8 years, 7 years in some of these cases. And it's just like at that point, it doesn't even matter if you're right or wrong. That's just a miserable existence. That's just a like it's a hollow existence. It's devoid of, and you can lie to yourself and you can say, "Oh no, I'm doing something important. I'm helping people. I'm for people not getting scammed by this thing or whatever." But it's hollow. It's hollow. You've yoked 1% of your life force to just fighting against the river, like fighting against something. And, I think there's a power and there's a potency um, to being for something. And so if you're not for this thing, man, go find something else you are for. Are you for fiat? Like go fight for fiat. If you're for like maybe you are. Maybe you can't be fully in that camp. Well, go find whatever you can fully take all of yourself and be behind. Um and it's just it's I think it's psychologically self-cannibalizing to to do this. Like it eats you. Become a victim to it. Um and yeah, and the concreteness, right? And part of the problem is there's a lack of like a specific thing. And I mean, ultimately the world is only ever changed by specific things. You can't invent the general direction of a computer. You can only invent a computer. You can't invent the general direction of nuclear power. You can only invent the concrete form. And like, history is, I think, filled with people who you know, they had a specific I like Steve Jobs could not have succeeded if he thought, well, maybe the Macintosh is a good architecture, but we really don't know. Maybe Windows or maybe there's something else, Betamax, VHS, I don't know. I'm not really going to commit to this one thing, right? Then there's no Apple, there's no Mac, yeah, you'll make mistakes, there'll be problems, like nothing's perfect. But if you never commit to one thing, you never get anywhere. And I almost wonder if that's part of the tension between like crypto and Bitcoin is like Bitcoiners commit to one thing. It's just like we're going to drive this one thing forward where I'll be totally fair here. Let me be totally fair. This doesn't apply to everybody in crypto, but I think for so many people, like it's almost opportunistic. It's almost just whatever the next hot thing is, and it gets discarded at the end of the year, and they move on to the next thing. There's there's a large rotating cast of, I think, opportunists. And I think so much of the power in the Bitcoin community is just it's a bunch of people who, with all of the faults and foibles that come with it, have like committed to one thing, you know?
I think that's such an important point, and perhaps one of the reasons that Bitcoiners are constantly, called toxic maximalists. This idea of you're toxic for, in their mind, or to take their argument, because you are discounting any of these other ideas that may be quite innovative and might be, it could be a really cool use case. It's innovative blockchain scaling technology and all sorts of fun and cool stuff. And why do you hate stuff that's fun and innovative? It's because you're so toxic. And really, it's like, okay, we hear you, and we will also adopt that as a badge of honor. Thank you for, never underestimate Bitcoiners' ability to take an insult and turn it into a badge of honor. It's really an amazing thing. But it
You
really just comes down to,
autistic 79
yeah,
IQ psychopath toxic maximalist. Oh,
yeah,
I
you,
love you
you
too.
Yeah, you dark triad, burning the planet, like it goes on and on. But it really, what it comes down to with Bitcoiners is just focus. And I think, and also acknowledgement of the scarcity of each of our own individual time, which says, I can't and don't want to spread myself in a million directions. And you might have what you feel is a cool use case, a cool, innovative piece, innovative idea, which of course involves either trade-offs in decentralization or security. But fine, go
Yeah.
have your fun. But we're just going to be over here focusing on this one thing, because fundamentally, none of the quote solutions that you are proposing to
Yeah.
Bitcoin's perceived limitations are solutions to the base problem, which is the brokenness of the money and the seigniorage that comes with it.
And what's in that is a commitment to like a moral and a values claim. And I think this goes really unexamined, but Bitcoiners are comfortable saying this is bad, this is good, and we're going to fight to make the good thing happen. And I think, coming back to this kind of state of modernity, I think most people live in such a paralyzed state of moral ambiguity where they are uncomfortable having a strong values, virtue, or moral claim. And well, we can't really know. I mean, how do we know what's right or wrong? Cultural relativism. I mean, to this tribe, they think this is good and we think it's bad. And you can't say one of these is right and the other is wrong because it's all socially constructed. And like they're so concerned in this reductionistic analysis of whether or not that's true. And not true, I think, in this capital T way, but true in this very reduced way. That they almost ignore that, like, any society that believes truth is on their side has a huge advantage over a paralyzed, ambiguous, um, flailing, right? Claim. Like it's hard to do big and great things if you don't believe they are right with a capital R, that they are true with a capital T. And the question of whether or not that is true, it almost misses, like the analysis almost misses the point. Like one must believe. Like one must believe. There's a great quote like, everybody worships. And it's true. Like there's this kind of thing, like this belief in secular society that you can escape that, and that there is some objective, detached, like view where you can be, not biased, but it doesn't exist. And like, we can just, you know, if you don't want to worship a religion, then you're going to worship, like academia, you're going to worship the media, you're going to worship like these various concepts, things, these drives, money, economy, status, like you enshrine something in your heart. And like you can't escape that. You can't escape that. And I think like Bitcoiners are willing to make value claims, virtue claims, morality claims. They're willing to stick by them and fight by them. And I think there's this hamstrung, castrated ambiguity in the crypto world where it's this constantly churning, ambiguous, like we just need to keep innovating, but we don't know really what we should be innovating towards or what really good is or where true north is. Just keep writing new code, you know?
Just keep fiddling with it.
Just keep fiddling with it, you know?
We've got to be improving, right? Because we're moving. So it's
Yeah.
got to be improving.
Invent something that gets users, and if it has users, then it's good. It's this kind of reduced economic, like it's replacing morality with economics, right? And I'm not like an anti-capitalist. I'm a big fan of the way markets have improved the world, but like the logic of economics is not substitutable for the logic of morality, right? Those are different things, right? And you can be pro markets and also recognize that like just because something is profitable does not mean it is good morally. And so just because you can make money doing seniorage on shitcoins and issuing tokens and people want to pay for leverage gambling, that doesn't mean that thing is good. It's just profitable.
I think that that's something that is either, again, purposefully or accidentally, wink, missed by so many. Because it's true. It's this idea that, well, if you are, and they always try to get you with the, well, don't you believe in the free market? It's like, yeah, I do. And the free market says that I can loudly go out and proclaim that what you're doing is a fucking shitty scam, you scammer. And that's the free market too. You are free to do what you want. And I am very free to call that a scam and to use my energy to discredit that scam if I want, because I have free will and I can do whatever I want there. And they view it, well, you must be, it's almost a communist idea, and it's like, but no, it's not. But that's cute of you to try that path there. It's funny. And I want to dig into a couple of these things a bit more. And I specifically wanted to get your thoughts on what is upstream of what as it comes to culture, law, and money. But before we do that, I also want to give you a chance to officially introduce yourself. And I do this with one simple question, and that's just, who are you and how did you get here today?
Yeah. So Steven Lubka, I lead the head of private clients for Swan Bitcoin. I started that side of the company 3 years ago, and I've led it ever since. We're I hard to quantify, but I think we're the largest like high net worth concierge white glove service in the whole Bitcoin world. Um, just has been an amazing journey. I mean, Swan's been an amazing journey. I think I was like employee number 15 and we're like 165 people now. So it's been a crazy, crazy awesome ride. But I run the kind of high net worth concierge team. And, I'm also very well known on Twitter for being, a sun maximalist and being very, very pro sunlight and walking and these kind of what I would say are base inputs to humanness, like humanness. Like, I don't think you can really abstract the experience of being human. I actually think like you lose something. I think there's something essential there. I think to be human is to walk. I think there is literally very few things more essential than that. It's how our brains developed. It's how so much developed. Anyways, but and I got here today because I think, man, I think you guys, I was a fan of you guys from like the first 2 weeks that you showed up on the internet. I think I remember I like DM'd you guys, like you were doing, I think crypto stuff, like it was like very briefly, and then you kind of
To be
went full
fair, nothing was ever promoting crypto.
no, 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 yeah,
We were using
yeah,
crypto
just
characters
you're
though.
just memes, yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
Just an important caveat.
correct, correct. But like, I mean, it was literally like 2 weeks. Like it was
Yeah.
like you had just like launched on Twitter, or like maybe you're doing other stuff before, but like, and I remember, I think I DM, I was like I want to connect you guys with Swan. I want to like you guys, these guys are going to be good. We've been friends ever since.
I think the first time we met in person, right before I was about to meet you, somebody thought I was you. And
Yeah,
that was the beginning of what it turns out would be a long running joke of many of
fantastic.
us 6 foot 2, 3, 4, 5 guys all getting either called Steven or Brandon or Walker or Joe or Corey.
Yeah,
And that has really just not stopped. It's incredible.
yeah.
It would almost somehow be offensive if the quality of the people we were getting compared against wasn't of such a high caliber. So every time it happens, I'm like, oh, that's a really, nice compliment. Great
Thank you,
guy.
thank you. Yeah,
But I'm
yeah,
Walker.
yeah.
But no, it's again, and you were very early on reaching out, and we always appreciated that because it's interesting trying to grow a, I don't know I guess it sounds almost gross to say, but like a social brand, a social
Sure.
presence. I don't know, because we never did it to make money. We did it because we were in the depths of the bear market. We'd been lurking on
Yeah.
Bitcoin Twitter, and we said, man, everybody seems like they could use a laugh. Let's just start making fun of stuff, both fiat stuff, but also let's make fun
Yeah.
of ourselves as Bitcoiners. And it's kind of weird to think about. We've basically only been making content in the bear market.
Yeah.
It's so,
Absolutely.
eh, which was kind of nice because you realized how much it meant to people to have a good chuckle at
Yeah.
that time. And now it's like I was looking back at a few of the songs that Carla did, especially, and like the screenshots we were using and things like that. And it's like, 19K, 21K, and you're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
boy, I would love for some of that action again. Just nuke it right down. We're getting too high, but Bitcoin's going to do what Bitcoin does.
Hey,
But
if you were on BitMEX, you got it.
oh yeah, there you go. But no,
But
I appreciate the introduction, and I think that what you have kind of how your presence online has evolved has also been really beautiful to watch because it's just, yeah, you talk about Bitcoin, but mostly for anyone that follows you, they realize that you are mainly talking about sun maxing and walking and philosophy and just life. And I think that this kind of bleeds into what I mentioned right before your intro, which is culture.
yeah.
And I think it's something that's very interesting amongst Bitcoiners. It's like truly a diverse group of individuals,
Absolutely.
really from all walks of life, from all educational backgrounds, from all over the world.
And it's only gotten more diverse over
Mhm.
time, like significantly.
And that's beautiful to see. Like, it's not the fake contrived diversity and inclusion. No, it's the true diversity that comes with something that is open, that
Yeah.
allows anyone to come to it, again, to run towards something. And I'm curious what you think. There are obviously Bitcoin is a common denominator, right? That's what is bringing all these people together. But it's difficult to define like what is a Bitcoiner. And no, it's not just somebody who loves to sun their balls and eat raw steaks. Like, although there may be many in that camp, but there are Bitcoiners from all walks of life. So what do you think is, besides Bitcoin,
Yeah.
what is the common denominator amongst Bitcoiners?
So, awesome question. And I've thought about this a lot, especially just because of my and I also I had no real account during the bull market. So I also it never was strategized at all, but I have a mid-sized Twitter account now that has done all right. And it was all kind of during the bear market. And like you said, like a lot of it was, I remember being nervous at first. I remember literally I put something in my bio that was it's something, it was like the wording was better, but it was like Monday through Friday, I'm going to talk about Bitcoin, but on the weekend, I'm going to talk about whatever I want. Cause I was literally nervous. I was like, oh, I don't know how people are going to respond if I just go off on, you know, different topics that have nothing to do with this. But I ended up so what I realized though after I started kind of just opening up and tweeting really about whatever I was thinking about at that time, whatever I was interested in, is that there was huge interest in it. And what that showed me was this quality of Bitcoiners that I think is the common denominator. And what it is that what Bitcoiners share is a willingness and a desire to investigate the truth for themselves. And that doesn't mean they're always right. That doesn't mean they can't get misled. That doesn't mean they can't believe crazy things, but they want to understand it for themselves. And they are comfortable, they're perfectly comfortable contradicting established norms, knowledge sets, beliefs, and they're willing to question, I think, most things. And that's a tendency that I think has become very maligned in the modern world. Like, oh, do your own research, you idiot, you're not an epidemiologist. And it's true. It's totally true that there are people that um, not everybody is truly capable of coming to the truth about complex topics. That is true. And that can be true. And yet it can also be true that it is a essential pursuit, that it is an essential pursuit. And while, yes, people can get misled and believe crazy things if they just kind of headbutt their way into complex fields, it is also true that if we create a society and a culture where we basically socially penalize people for doing their own thinking about things and questioning topics and views, that is equally, if not more dangerous. It is more dangerous. Um, and it creates just a terrible system there. And so, Bitcoiners I see as people that are willing, there's that image of like one person standing against the crowd being like, yeah, you're all wrong. They're the person that's willing to say that, for better or worse. And that is the common thread. And I've noticed this. So Bitcoiners share a lot of other like online communities with each other. Like health is a big one, diet. Like there's obviously a huge like carnivore and Bitcoiner intersection, right? Like that was another, like there's an online, like there's carnivore Twitter and then there's Bitcoin Twitter. And those are like relatively overlapping Venn diagram, like, circles. But there's many others, right? There's kind of like, um, I don't even know what to call it, but like, broader like alternative health Twitter. There's a lot of Bitcoiners that participate in that. There's this thing called like Teapot, this part of Twitter that's kind of more like it's more like tech, like like liberal or not like coastal elite tech worker kind of, but like intersecting with like Buddhism and for like kind of left leaning Buddhism, semi new age thing. But there's a subset of Bitcoiners that heavily interact with that, and I engage with some of those people in that community as well, and those have been great relationships at times. But there's all of these interlocking sub-communities that I think intersect with Bitcoiners in a really interesting way. And again, the common thread there is they're all what all of those communities have in common is they're contradicting the kind of mainstream belief about something. Whether that is meditation, health, or diet, whether that is economics, whether that is energy, obviously energy and Bitcoiners, like those intersect. Um, it's really robust. It's really interesting. And it's something I've kind of observed for a while because like I also like engaging with some of those other communities and have gotten a lot of value out of it.
Whether you consider yourself a Bitcoiner or you're just starting your journey down the rabbit hole, it's never a bad time to get your security figured out. Head to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use the promo code Walker for 5% off the Bitcoin only BitBox02 hardware wallet. Then get your Bitcoin off the exchange and into your own self-custody. The BitBox02 is easy as hell to use whether you're new to Bitcoin or a seasoned psychopath. It's Bitcoin only, and it's fully open source. You can head to their GitHub and check for yourself. There is no need to trust me. When you go to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use promo code Walker, not only do you get 5% off, but you also help support this fucking podcast. So thank you. I think it's a perfect description that it's the Bitcoiner is somebody who is willing to stand out against the crowd of public or popular opinion, whatever you would call it.
Yeah.
Because again, in order to do that, there has to be something that you are passionate about, something that you are for, because otherwise you will not have the guts
won't
to
take the
stand out on
risk.
your own.
You won't take the risk.
Exactly. You won't take that risk for just something you're against without, being able to provide an alternative to that. And I think it really, to put it a different way, it's the openness to search for and accept possible alternatives to the status quo.
Yeah.
It's the willingness to say, it's questioning, right? It's doubt and doubt not with a negative connotation, but in the dubito ergo cogito, cogito ergo sum connotation. I doubt, therefore I think therefore I am. But in order to think, you must doubt, because if you don't doubt, well, then you're not thinking. You're just accepting whatever is, right? And so I think that it's an important part. And I'm kind of curious, I was
There's a
talking with,
quote. There's a
oh
quote.
yeah,
I
do
just
it, do
pulled
it.
it up. This is Richard Feynman, one of the
Yeah.
great scientists of the modern world. It is imperative in science to doubt. It is absolutely necessary for progress in science to have uncertainty as a fundamental part of your inner nature. Like doubt, it's the heart, it's the beating heart. Like one must, in the way this is saying, like doubt, like question, wonder, dig deeper.
Well, and that questioning, that wonder, that doubt that Bitcoiners have, I think, is one of the strongest forces to mitigating the Gell-man amnesia that we see across so many sectors. And for anybody who doesn't is too lazy to Google this, it's the idea that you are reading a newspaper, let's say, which would be terrible for the environment. You should absolutely not be. You should get rid of all your physical newspapers. This was actually just a long con stop the presses
Oh
joke. No,
my
but
God, he did
yeah,
it.
I worked it in there. But no, you're reading the newspaper and you read a topic about which you have a lot of specific knowledge, and you realize that whoever was writing that article is saying things that are completely incorrect, that are factually inconsistent with the reality, that are just wrong. But then you turn the page to something and you read an article about which you are not an expert, and you treat it as though they must be telling the truth because you don't know any better. And I think that if you have that seed of doubt, and again, doubt in a positive, very positive connotation, you are less likely to fall victim to that Gell-man amnesia, because you say you don't, even if you are not an expert you're an expert on topic A, but not on topic B, you scrutinize topic B with the same level of doubt that you would topic A. And then you also probably start educating yourself on topic B, because you say, you know what? I know that they're lying about A. I know that because I'm an expert in A. They're probably not telling the total truth about B either. And I'd like to find out more about that. And
Yeah,
that's that rabbit hole mentality, right? That's
absolutely.
why Bitcoiners get called autists all the time too, because it's like I'm gonna hyper focus on this thing and I'm gonna learn so much about it, and I might not sleep for a couple days, because that's how a lot of us were with Bitcoin when we really got it, And I think that that's a beautiful thing, and that's also there's more of that doubt starting to seep into, let's call them Gen Pop, the general population.
Well,
But
and
it's
this is
not the same. Again, it's without the lens of Bitcoin.
it's
Yeah,
distrust of doubt.
yes,
Yeah. They
yes,
don't trust the source, but it's usually like it's relatively devoid of that spirit of inquiry. And this speaks to I think there's these two intersecting concepts that books even that I think illustrate this moment in time really well. There's a book called The Revolt of the Masses, which is phenomenal. And then there's a concept from another book I don't remember called Elite Overproduction. And I think these two things have intersected in a really interesting way. So, Revolt of the Masses, the thesis of the author was that, like, for all of human history, governments had a monopoly on information. Like, there were no mass media, there was no dissemination of information that was not relatively tightly controlled by the political power. And then all of a sudden, that changes with the internet. And the author gives this as like one of the like the first time in his mind that the true representation of this theory comes about. And so you have this it was I might butcher this, but I think it's like there was a controversy when George W. Bush was president where it was like he faked draft documents or dodged there was anyways. And so the media was running this document. It was a paper, and it was like proof that he had done this thing. He had dodged the draft or whatever it was. And so this was like the biggest media in the land, the most elite, institutional, credible. And some like autist, random, anonymous brother in a corner of the internet discovered that the typeface that was used in the letter didn't exist at the time that they were claiming, and that it was a forgery. And like Jimmy John 420 like blew up the credibility of the mainstream media. And this was the beginning of the book, The Revolt of the Masses, of this complete loss of credibility, because there's now a two-way microphone where the media can say X, Y, or Z, and I can go, no, no, it isn't. You're wrong. And there's pros and cons to that, right? Like there's it has created a very a big breakdown in social trust. And even if that is warranted, it's still consequential. But it's this concept of like, trust is falling because we're fact checking everybody on the media, and they're full of shit half the time, or more than half. But I think it also intersects with this concept called elite overproduction. And so basically this is pretty simple. We are putting more people through college than ever before. If somebody completes higher education, they have a social expectation of status. If I sacrifice and get a master's degree or a doctorate or whatever it is, that society owes me a high status job. The problem, we have too many of these people and not enough high status jobs. So now they are resentful. They're both resentful, and we're shuffling unqualified people into whatever positions we can put them in at scale to like diffuse this resentment. We have all of these people with degrees and qualifications, and we're jamming them into stuff as fast as we can, and they're incompetent. And so then there's a lot to criticize in the media because we're jamming incompetent people in front of the microphone. I actually was amazed. I hope no reporter ever listens to this.
Probably
But like,
not, but maybe someday.
probably not. But like, I do media, right? Like, I get interviewed. I was in the Wall Street Journal a couple weeks ago. I was in Barron's. I was on NASDAQ, right? Like, I do that. And when I first started talking with reporters and journalists at like, reputable places, like high places, I was shocked. There was something I was shocked by, and it was that nobody fact checked a single word I said. There was no like thing. I like whatever I said basically got put in there. And now, like, for any reporter that ever listens to this, I work very hard to be accurate, and I actually am very knowledgeable about what you're interviewing me about, which is Bitcoin. And I've never misrepresented anything or taken advantage of that. But I was shocked at the like, there's no countervailing adversarial expert. My understanding of how the system works is you interview someone who's an expert. You don't interview someone else to contradict them. And thus media is born.
That it's actually so interesting, and I wonder how much of it comes down to time and comes down to,
Yes.
you know what? We literally don't have time. We were told to get one expert to talk about this. We got the bear, walking 30,000 steps a day sunshine guy, who's also happens to be a Bitcoin guy. And we got him to talk about it. And so that's what we were told to do. And now let's get this thing out there so we can move on to the next one right now.
And that's valid. That's valid because it's not just time to interview a second person, but it's an infinite regress. Because if he disagrees with me, well, now who's going to disagree with him? And it goes on forever and nothing ever gets published. So I can have empathy for the challenge, but I was stunned. I was like I could have said something that wasn't true. I didn't, but I could have. Like, that's crazy.
It is funny, and one thing I want to double check. Speaking of things, fact checking things, revolt of the masses or revolt of the public?
Public, I think. It's public.
I just fact checked you in real time. I happen to know this because Carla recently read the book, and I was like, I'm pretty sure. So see, but your information was what the meaning was all very proper. It was just a small typo. But
Yeah.
now we've corrected it in real time. We don't need I
Without
don't need to,
having to reprint any newspapers and chop down trees.
which is just a travesty. It's insane. I was listening to a space last night that Elon was on with the Missouri AG. He might be his name might be David Bailey, or there's a lot of Baileys though. Or Andrew Bailey. It might be Andrew Bailey too. We've got both in Bitcoin, so maybe
That's the Bank of England and one of my best friends in the space.
right. But he was talking about how useless newspapers were, and I'm like, yes, I remember when you retweeted that anti-newspaper propaganda video I made. Amazing. But I digress. I wanted to ask you something, which is something I've been just thinking about a lot lately and trying to talk to people about and just see where people lie. And it has to do with the intersection or causal effects of money, law, and culture. And Jeff Booth has said many times that money is superordinate to laws. So not subordinate, superordinate. Like it is
Okay.
above laws. It is, or another way of saying it's upstream. Money is upstream of laws. I was also talking with an author I had on here, Devin Erickson. He's got a phenomenal
Oh,
sci-fi
that's the
book.
fire.
Yeah, have you read it?
I haven't, but I have it.
I highly recommend you dig into that thing. It is
Yeah.
a wonderful book. I haven't read
Yeah.
sci-fi in a while,
Yeah.
like in years. And this felt like a re-entry to that
Okay.
joy of reading fiction. Because I feel like all I've read in the past few years is like very interesting things, but it's like Bitcoin
Sure.
books, Austrian economics, some
Yeah,
other
yeah.
philosophy, good amount of stoicism. There was a lot of Seneca in there. But I needed some fiction.
Yeah.
But
I
so,
love fiction.
and for anyone listening to this, Theft of Fire is this is a plug for it because it's a great book, and Devin's a fascinating guy. But
He captivated me with some of his Twitter threads. He had a few Twitter threads that were just so good. And I ordered the book after that. I haven't gotten to it yet, but I followed him and yeah.
Same here. It was his interaction with Emmett Shear, the interim CEO of OpenAI.
Yes, exactly.
Where
Exactly.
Emmett was like, you know what? Maybe 100% inheritance tax is a good idea.
That's a thread. Same for me too. I read that and I was like, this guy is fucking great.
It's incredible. But what Devin was saying when I was talking to him is just this idea that culture is upstream of law. So that
Yeah.
culture, is, and I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
And I also think then, okay, so we've got culture upstream of law. We've got money upstream of law. But where do money and culture intersect? Because as we were kind of getting to earlier a little bit, to blame fiat money for all of the ills of society is probably a bit reductionist.
Yeah.
That being said, we can see through historical examples that when money breaks,
It has impact.
society breaks.
Yeah, it does
So
have impact.
how do you view that
Yeah.
intersection, that interaction?
So that's a great question. So I think culture is the most upstream of law out of any of those. Culture is upstream of everything, really. Like the reason we do any of this, it's mediated through our values, our culture, our beliefs. And money, I think, is also upstream of law in some ways. I think it's less upstream than culture is. But in all of these cases, it's a two-way street. It is not just like culture influence law, but law doesn't influence culture. They both influence each other. And that's the thing, like money influences law, but law also influences money in many ways, right? Because, I mean, look at all the laws around money, right? Half the time we're fighting again, KYC, FinCEN, AML, like those are laws influencing how we manage and interact with money, even Bitcoin, right? Like we can't just, it's obvious that laws could be passed that dramatically impact how we use our Bitcoin, right? So I think there's a strong two-directional street with law and money. And and there's a weaker but still present one between culture and law or money. But these things, like I think culture is very deep in core, and it originates a lot. It originates how we construct our systems on a basic level. Like, what are the institutional values, right? Like, so if we think about kind of the history of Western civilization, right? Because we're kind of having this discussion in a Western model, we have all of these principles, which we kind of take as a given today. We want to have rule of law. We want to have this kind of, I use this in the classical sense, like classically liberal social order, like freedom of religion, freedom of speech. This influences our legal system and what sort of laws, like right to an attorney, right to a fair trial, like the role of the Supreme Court in overruling other agencies and etc. Right? And so those all like emerge from these cultural values that were not always there, right? Like rewind to, you know, 300 AD England, like it's a very different set of assumptions. And like we go through the Enlightenment and we go through like the Scottish Reformation and we go through like these phases where ideas blossom and culture changes. And then that shapes legally how we construct and institutionally both money and law. Um, and then we also find that people with a lot of money, institutions with a lot of money, or institutions with access to the institution of money, the money printer or etc., the treasury system, or things with a lot of legal power, well, suddenly they seem to have more power than ever before to influence culture, right? Like so much of culture as we see it, I think is more weaponized by money than ever before in human history. And it's because of mass media, right? Like no mass media, like if you're super rich in 400 AD England, it's a lot harder to like mess with culture, especially because like culture is both this very old thing that is like lindy and hard to fuck with, and then whatever's left is controlled by the church. Um, and like it's a lot harder to do it. But now, today, uh, my God, like the media is so porous to wealth. It's so influenced. It's so easy to, I mean, God, you can just slap a video. I guess I'm gonna say this. Okay, so there was this great tweet that was like this ad that was like the only reason people with Down syndrome don't drink alcohol is because you're culturally conditioned that they shouldn't drink alcohol. And let's be clear, like Down syndrome in this sense, we're not talking about people that are a little autistic. Like average IQ there is like sub 70, right? Like there's it's a different sort of thing. And it was this ad with just like poppy music and like inspirational of just like, you tell me I can't drink alcohol, have a margarita, so I don't have one. How about next time you tell me I can drink a margarita and then I will be able to and it'll be fine. And like the music goes off and everyone's happy and inspired. And it's like this weird thing where, okay, um, society has this guardrail, right? Of like, okay, like, maybe people with severe mental handicaps, we shouldn't serve them an intoxicant. Okay, like I'm not even interested in arguing whether that's right or wrong, but that is a social guardrail that we have. And suddenly some fucking NGO, by the way, with not a single person with Down syndrome is on the board. Like it's literally just like random fucking people that have decided this is what they're doing, are like, putting millions of dollars into a television ad to like influence this one like arcane social guardrail. It's crazy, right? It's a really porous relationship where money can influence culture in this insane way.
I have not seen that particular ad, and this was like on
Wild.
on like the old, like on actual television, like
It
a
looked like a TV ad. I saw it on Twitter. Like it looked like a TV ad. I don't,
either
you
way,
know.
someone spent a good amount of money to make it high production value, type thing,
Yeah,
which is
exactly. It wasn't cheap. It was a
well,
very well produced. Yeah, assume that I can. Global World Down Syndrome Day. Viral ad challenges stereotypes.
it just
So
seems
yeah,
and I'm all for challenging stereotypes. It just seems weird to challenge one about intoxicants specifically. It's like, was this paid for by Bud Light? I
it's a
mean,
few other things too. It's assume
yeah,
I can drink a margarita. Assume I can live on my own. Assume I can like. But again, it's like it's rooted in this like literally like this social constructivism. The ad literally argues that the only reason people with Down syndrome can't like don't drink, live on their own, like operate. I don't know what the third one is because of social beliefs about that. And it is this like this concept of base reality doesn't exist, right? It's this wild reduction where like, if we just believe that everybody can do physics as good as Einstein, then they'll be able to. We just tell you that you're a fucking moron, and so you are a fucking moron. If we told you you were a genius, you'd invent new physics. And it's my
like if we
God.
just say a man can get pregnant, then he can, and it there you go. We said it, so it must be reality. It's an interesting thing to look at, and I don't know. Again, talking about the intersection of money and of culture and of law and technology, obviously fits in and permeates all of this, and probably is culture heavily influences technology, I think, in
Yeah.
many ways. But then also, of course, again, there's a symbiosis there. There's a give and take. But we're at this strange point where I don't think human beings, we are not evolutionarily equipped to process as much information as we are
100%.
currently fed. We are
100%.
not we are not built for it at a and you can make the argument, well, yes, we are. And it's like, well, okay, you can say that. That doesn't make it true. Purely from an evolutionary standpoint, we were not built to
This is
consume
not a
so much.
revolutionary environment. That's a fact.
Yeah,
It isn't.
yeah. Like we are we are very highly intelligent animals, but we have not evolved to the point where the information that is now being given to us, that has become available in the palm of our hand over the last couple decades, there is no way our brains can have evolved fast enough to be able to handle all of that. And that's why I think that information processing, signal detection, and noise reduction in human beings is such an important skill to be able to learn, to be able to actually separate the wheat from the chaff and say, this is what is important for me
Yeah.
to pay attention to. Because if you don't, you will be overwhelmed and easily susceptible to manipulation, I think.
You're like these last two dialogues, they really touch on it reminds me of Nick Land. I don't know if you're familiar or if audiences, but he was like one of the first, he's a philosopher and he's one of the first modern days alive. That dealt with like AI and accelerationism and kind of this, back in the I think the 90s, like was writing about AI like way before pretty much anybody else, and kind of some of these challenges. But he has this one concept that he views like capitalism, like Europe like unleashed capitalism on the world, and in the process of doing so, like what happened is there were like he gives the example of like a nuclear reactor, and there's containment rods that contain it, and those containment rods are culture. They're like the social guardrails, right? And what Europe starts to do is they start to rip out the containment rods, and in doing so, what they unleash is this kind of modern form of capitalism, which starts like an out of control accelerationist chain reaction as information technology, like it's this almost this view that the system itself has desires of its own, and it starts irrespective to human wants, desires, cultural values. It starts just accelerating information in this kind of um this way that is not concerned with humans, that is not like it's independent of us, and it's the whole system now is geared in this way that is like this rapid acceleration of information. And I just think the last two thing, like you talked about the information, but we're also talking about this thing where no matter where you look, people want to rip out the social guardrails. Like I feel like they just see it and there's this reflexive, like, oh, there's a boundary. How about we get rid of that? Where did this come from? Why are we trying to rip out every single prohibition, boundary, guardrail, whatever, whether it's, it's about sex, it's about drugs, it's about like religion, it's about the way we operate, but you have this out of control dismantling of any prohibition or anything which impairs just the unobstructed actualization of human desire. And I don't say that in a super positive way. Like in the same way that like you don't give a child everything at once. Like not everything at once is good. And yet people are just like they see, oh, I can't do this. Well, that's oppression and let's remove it.
I think that that's actually such an interesting point. It's something that kind of ideologically I try to question myself on a lot, because I believe in the freedom for people to do whatever the fuck they want and to choose. And now that obviously has limits. For example, I don't think you should have the freedom to go and kill someone.
Of course.
I don't think you should be able to do anything you want with children. And I think if you do those things, you should be very, very, very harshly punished.
Yeah.
And depending on the severity of what you did, you should maybe be put down. But then I also struggle with the idea of the death penalty, because that's a slippery slope for the state to have. So, and I mean, these are difficult questions.
Complex questions.
And there is a lot of nuance, but there's also, I think, for most people, and this comes back to what you brought up earlier about just morality and the idea that
we shouldn't sell meth at CVS to the mentally handicapped, right? Like, I think we can agree that's just a thing we shouldn't do.
Right.
We go from there.
We now know your line in the sand, but no, it's true. I think generally most people, unless you are of the 1 to perhaps 3, depending on who you ask, % of the population that is a clinical psychopath, which is actually, the levels of psychopathy in our culture are actually extremely high. If you think about that, like at a minimum, 1 in every 100 people you deal with would probably be classified as a clinical psychopath. Most of them are very good at hiding it and get along very well, and many are quite successful. Sociopaths, not quite as much, tend to be more violent and aggressive and unable to deal with impulse control. But that's a whole different, we could spend too much time talking on that. But unless you are a psychopath, unless you have a neurological deficiency that prevents you from empathizing with others, you can generally tell, whether you admit it or not is a different story, but you can generally tell, you know what? That is something that is just morally wrong. I can tell deep inside of me, I can feel that action is truly wrong. And, again, not everybody has that ability. I don't want to discriminate against the psychopaths. Far be it for me to marginalize and oppress clinical psychopaths. It would be terribly. Yeah. How dare I? I think every board, as part of diversity and inclusion initiatives, should have at least 20% psychopaths. And the irony is they probably have like 50% already. So we're good to go. We fulfilled the quota, right?
That's, you don't have to worry about it.
I don't know. It's an interesting thing.
Well, so, and you say like you feel it, like you can just feel it. You know that it's wrong, right? And you're effectively, like, if I were to formalize what you're saying, you're making a phenomenological argument that phenomenologically, like experientially, not mentally, but experientially, there's inherent truth. There's inherent knowingness there. And this is like I actually talk about this a lot. This is actually like a favorite topic of mine, and I've like kind of tongue in cheek talked about it on Twitter as vibes. Oh, like there's vibes, like vibe supremacy, investing off vibes. Like, really, what I'm talking about is phenomenology, and really, we live in a society that has totally discounted that and effectively believes that the only knowledge which exists is formalized, like logical analysis. And that is the only way in which one can know something. And that's insane. It's wrong. It's harmful. And it disassociates people from that embodied reality that, yes, I agree with you. Like, you know you're doing something wrong. Like if you were to go do certain, like you would feel it. And the kind of the people that would argue with this would be like, well, like, how do you know what that feeling represents? And you go into like three layers of abstraction, and it's like, no, like there's a hierarchy here of values of like what we give concern to, and actually I place logical analysis below phenomenological experience. And we live in a society that has elevated the abstract, the formalized, the like reductionistic analysis that is like the most real thing, even though it is the least real. It is literally constructed, and we've taken base reality, which is that you have sense perceptions, you have like actuality to your experience, and we've said that that's basically like hallucinatory, that it's just like this nonsense made up, it's devoid of intelligence. And we are so ass backwards in that way. And people live from that place. They live from that place. And no wonder they never know anything. They can't decide. They can't act. They can't choose. They can't live because life happens phenomenologically. It doesn't happen analytically. Like that's just like that's a fact.
Eh, it's funny, and first of all, I think that's just a. I can tell that you have good vibes about this topic. That this is a topic that gets the good vibes flowing. And it's funny, I just out of curiosity, I asked Grok beforehand. I was like, give me some, pretend I'm Joe Rogan. Actually, I think I might have said Howard Stern. And I'm interviewing Zambla Hodel, and give me some interview topics for him. And one of them was, I haven't used any of them, but I was just curious what it would actually be. And wait, where did it go here? Da da da. Oh, I'm gonna find it. You've shared your love for sunlight and the importance of vibes. How do you maintain a positive mindset and keep your vibes high in challenging situations? And what advice would you give to our listeners? Which I just thought was a kind of hilarious question.
That's hilarious.
But what? But actually, okay, this is the one. This is the one AI generated question that I will use. How do you keep your vibes high? And how do you? Does it have anything to do with sunlight, walking, and thinking for yourself by any chance?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a whole thing once on Twitter. I think it was like in the comments with a friend, but that I think like happiness, right? We think so much about happiness. Like what does it mean to be happy and the pursuit of happiness? And in talking about this, I like to differentiate, there's happiness and there's meaning slash purpose. And they're two different things, right? One can be happy, like mood. Like I think mood, like you could be in a happy mood or not a happy mood. You feel kind of energized and alert and smiley and like you're having a good time and there's pleasurable sensations, right? That's happy. Um, Meaning, purpose, that's something different. That's like you're actually willing to be unhappy sometimes in the pursuit of something which is meaningful. Like people are willing to work really long hours at jobs they don't like to take care of their family. And they may not like the job or they may be put into a difficult circumstance at some point, but there's such a sense of like meaning that comes from taking care of, your family, right? So those are two different things, and they're both important for what I'd say well-being, which I think can include both of those things. Happiness, I believe, is literally the sun. Like literally there is like a non like there's not a lot of loss in this like the amount of light you get and the quality of your light environment is how happy on a mood basis you are. And so in some ways I'm being very reductionistic about that, and I'm saying like happiness is a brain state. Like, and we know for a fact that the sunlight and light environment is one like your number one determination of like your dopamine and your hormonal balance and like all of these crucial like how good the vibes are in the brain, right? Like it's literally sun. Like that's what it is. That's the source. It doesn't like fucking you can eat McDonald's all day, and if you're in a perfect light environment, you're gonna be in a great fucking mood. That's just a fact. Now, that doesn't do anything for like meaning and purpose. And I'm not saying we can just reduce complex human experience to that biochemistry, because we obviously need something else to feel well-being. But like it literally is that. And I challenge anybody, if you think this sounds like absolutely batshit, like go sit in a dark room for 24 hours for one, not even 20, like 12 hours, just the time you're awake. Literally sit in a dark room for 12 hours, no lights, pitch dark curtains. You will go fucking insane. You will lose your mind. Now do that for a day or a week or whatever, and then spend a day or a week where you're literally never indoors. You're just like, at least until the sun goes down, like all day you go outside, you don't go inside till the sun sets. Do that for a week and tell me it wasn't the best fucking mood of your life. Like it's just there's like a non-separation. There's like a our systems, these bodies, that out there, sun, like they're interwoven, and you can't. It's non-optional. Like you don't get a choice.
I mean, I may be biased because I personally love the sun. But that's just the thing, isn't it? Like nobody feels worse after getting some sun on them. Like, and I think that there's so much talk of all these biohacking.
Let me interject
things.
there real
Please.
quick. There's this weird, if you have been chronically indoors, you might feel weird the first day or two. This is actually something I've noticed. If your system's all screwy and your circadian rhythm is totally disrupted, this actually happened to me. It was raining here for like 3 weeks straight. It's never rained so straight. And it was like just dark and for weeks. And my whole light environment got the first day or two that I was back in the sun, I was like discombobulated. Like it was like my system didn't know what to do with it. So just on that, if you're listening to this, if you go to try it and like the first day you don't feel good, like persist for like, give it a couple days. Anyways, continue.
That's fair. So basically, if you're in the Midwest, once the sun comes back out again in the spring, give yourself some time. But no, I was going to say, there's so much of you see all these, biohacking type people that I'm using biohacking in like the Silicon Valley kind of vibe there, where all these different things you can do and to, optimize your performance and to be more efficient and productive and to, boost up various levels of things. And it's like, yep, okay. Or just go walk in the sun.
Yeah.
Like we love to complicate things. So not all of us, but it seems that there's a tendency these days, perhaps because life appears so complicated, we think there must be necessarily complex solutions to our complex problems.
Yeah.
But the solutions are often very simple. And it's like, drink a good amount of water, go out, walk around in the sun, walk around barefoot. It feels great, and you will literally discharge built up static into the ground, and it's wonderful. And also your feet won't be trapped in shoe prisons that turn them into weird misshapen blobs of bony flesh at the bottom of your legs. You will feel better.
Yeah.
And you don't need a guru for that.
No,
You can just
doesn't
you can just
cost you
walk.
anything.
No,
It's
it's
free.
free.
Just do it. There's no barrier.
It's
Yeah.
truly great advice, and that's the thing. Most of the best remedies for things are free
Yeah.
because they're things that we've been doing for millennia as humans, and they're not things that we just invented. They're things that
Yeah.
have been around for many, many, many generations.
No one's deficient in Prozac. Like that doesn't exist. Like you're not Prozac deficient. That is not what's going on. That maybe there are cases where that is helpful for certain people, but like your body doesn't lack Prozac, right? Like it if things are not working right, there's something else it lacks, but it's not that.
It's usually
Um,
vitamin D. Aren't like the majority of men? I'm not sure about the
super
stats on
vitamin
women,
D
but
deficient,
yeah,
super vitamin D deficient. And the thing is like the supplemental form is not one for one. There's a lot of complexity. We're only discovering this more and more as time goes on. I'm not saying it has no impact. If you live in fucking Norway, I'm not saying stop taking it in the winter or whatever. But like, it's not the same. There's complex processes that happen via the skin. It literally converts your cholesterol into vitamin D. Everyone has high cholesterol, which is, its own kind of rabbit hole,
yeah.
but like the sun literally takes your cholesterol and turns it into vitamin D. That doesn't happen when you take the pill. The pill is like one narrow type. There's like 27 different metabolites and different types. There's a whole process. It works differently. And there's a ton of studies that have shown that like things that vitamin D improves, it improves when you get it via the skin, and it doesn't improve it when they supplement it. It like some of the stuff it does, some of the stuff it doesn't, but it's clear that it is not a one for one substitution. But it's also the sun is so much more than vitamin D, and sun via the eyes is actually, I think, the more critical part. There's so you have like UVB, which does ultraviolet B, that does the vitamin D, right? Then you have UVA, which when it hits the body, it nitric oxide release. It lowers blood pressure, it lets your blood go easier. There's infrared radiation that when it hits the body, it actually produces intracellular melatonin. And this is literally the most powerful antioxidant. Like blueberries ain't shit compared to this. Like it is mitochondrial, which is your basic energy system. It helps your mitochondria function so much better, right? So just getting that infrared, and that's why people do like red light therapy now. The infrared panels, infrared saunas, right? That's some of that. You're getting that from the sun. And then there's the whole visual light. So the visual light is really critical. So your eye, everything in your body operates on a circadian biological rhythm, and it influences your hormones, your testosterone, your dopamine, your serotonin, your everything. Your growth hormone releases in the evening, your digestion, everything. There's like half of the genes in your body get turned on or off based on circadian triggers. And so when your environment's all miscalibrated and you have dark or dim days and bright nights because of artificial light, you're ass backwards. Literally everything's fucked in a sense. It's fucked up. And getting that back in, it influences every system. And so the light is like the in the eyes is a primary trigger. Like skin, like great, good. There's a lot of benefits. You do need it, but it's seeing the sun in the morning, turning that system on. Probably everyone's heard of Huberman at this point. He's big about that. And mitigating, I mean, seeing light throughout the day, keeping, brightness up is good. And then, I mean, this is a tricky one for people, but like I do not use conventional artificial light at night. Like when the sun goes down, I only use pure red light. It's like 100% red spectrum. The reason it doesn't disrupt melatonin, it doesn't disrupt the nighttime cycle. It can be weird for people. They're like, "Oh, what do you mean? Like you gotta you gotta get a screen filter. You gotta like download the red filter on all your screens. You gotta replace the light bulbs. You've gotta like, yeah, it's a little bit of a project. Like it'll change the way you're used to living." But I've never met a single person, and I've done this for 8 years, man. Like this isn't like a new thing for me. Like I was into the sunlight stuff before Bitcoin. Um, Everyone I've turned on to this, it might have been a little weird at first. No one has ever gone back. You do it for a week, it'll change your life. You're like, you do this for a week and like literally like even like do it for a couple nights and then do it like let the sun go down, let 2 hours go by, and then turn the red lights back into your normal lights. And you will literally be like, this is evil. This is profane. This is sacrilegious. It's cursed. Like something is wrong here on a very deep, profound level. These bright white LEDs in the middle of the night. I have sinned against something.
It's funny. I recently got a red light reading lamp
Yeah.
for late at night because I was like, well, that's like a little thing I can do. And I've been debating the red light at night because, first of all, it feels like it sets a nice mood. It's like, okay,
Relaxing.
yeah.
Oh,
So I may have to give this the full go because
commit.
you're quite convincing with it. I also
Commit.
realized at the beginning of this show we should have said, listen to this while walking outside in the sun. But luckily, I'll do a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
an intro for it, so now I can tell people that.
Good,
But
good. But
so
do it, like commit, like
yeah,
it's cheap, it's inexpensive. Get a couple red light bulbs, like it'll cost you $30 if you have like several you need to do. There you can get one for like $3 or $4. Just do it for a week. Like I there's few things I can promote as heavily as just like almost costless, so good for you, and like you'll love it. And it's like there's this light dark cycle. It's primordial. It's primordial. Like it's so deep in here. It's so deep in this thing that like there was light and there was dark and it was this eternal cycle. And we can't just like disrupt that. You can't like it's not daytime all the time. And when you start to have that sun goes down, lights get really dim, there's something psychological it does. Like it's psychologically good because it's like you're not always in like daytime go mode, achieve mode, like do mode. There's a rest and recuperation and it's like a more intimate environment too. Like, you and your wife and your family and you're around the fire and it's light and it's warm, it's dim. It's like there's something intimate like to it that is, I mean, our ancestors have gathered around campfires at night for, millions of years.
I love me a good fire. Since I was a
Yeah.
kid, I have. Uh,
Yeah.
I was homeschooled for the majority of my youth, and so I'd finish all of my work within probably like 3 hours of the day, or maybe a little less than that, because it turns out you don't need to do 8 hours of
No.
book work to
No.
literally front to back teach yourself algebra from the textbook. Like you can do
Nope.
just fine. But then the rest of the day, I would pretty much be outside starting fires, contained fires. I was not like burning down forests, but just starting fires. And there's nothing better. That's another one of those primordial things
No.
that, like, nobody hates being around a fire and
No.
watching it. And there's a
There's
reason that we
something.
can just watch it and be mesmerized and
Yeah.
watch it dance all night long. And it's a beautiful thing. So if you're listening to this, walk outside, preferably in the sunshine, but maybe the sun doesn't always shine where you are. So just walk outside and perhaps get yourself some red lights, which I may be doing as well, and start fires in a contained and manageable and non-destructive way. I'm not advocating that anyone burn any buildings down. If there's any spooks listening to this, this is
And you can do candles or red lights or candles. Like fire is
there we go.
also totally fine. It doesn't disrupt the system. So if you want to do something a little more natural or ancestral, like, get a candle. And that's nice too. Like it's honestly, it's better. It's more fun. Like sometimes we'll just put a candle on in the evening and and you can get a red light filter for your fucking computer and you can watch Netflix. Like I'm not asking you to like literally just download Twilight on your fucking laptop and put a red light bulb or a candle on and watch your fucking show. It'll be a little red. Like you'll be okay.
Is Twilight the name of the app, or are you
Yeah.
talking? Okay, I was like, are
Yeah.
you a big like Twilight fan?
No,
Okay.
no, 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 no.
I
No, there's an
wasn't.
app called Twilight and Flux. So F.Lux or Twilight, depend Mac or PC.
Okay, well, good to know. These are great tips, and I have enjoyed the hell out of this. I want to be conscious of your scarce time, so uh, I like to end by usually just asking, what are you reading? You've given a couple recommendations already with
Yeah.
Revolt of the Public. We talked about Theft of Fire earlier. Is there
Yeah.
anything else that you're reading right now that you're really enjoying? It can also be any sort of like long form or just maybe anything else that you're really enjoying digesting the information contained within.
Ian McGilchrist, The Matter with Things. And I've been reading this for a while. Why? Because it's 1,400 pages long. So not a bite-sized read. But he's also got podcasts and another book which is shorter. And it is, I think, in my opinion, the most important philosophical work of the modern age. And what it deals with is some of the topics I think we've talked about here. Um, and it deals with this reductionism we've been talking about. And the book is an argument that the world cannot be understood in that way. In a holistic sense, like you can't understand the whole of the world, right? Like, so you can reduce everything to parts, right? Like that's what we do when we analyze and deduce, and that is powerful in terms of our ability to control the world, to manipulate the world, to build technologies and influence things, right? And that's fine. That's not a bad thing. We need that. That's been advantageous. And that is maybe a correct mindset to use when you're trying to control the world, right? If you're trying to build a faster plane or a new technology or Bitcoin or whatever, you want to break everything down into components and understand how the individual components work, right? Like we'll use an example of biology. We've been talking about biology. Breaking the body down into proteins and enzymes and cells and all that, right? Like that's good if you're trying to figure out how to turn this one gene on or off or treat a medical condition. Fine, that's great. But you cannot understand what it is to be human through a reductive analysis of all of the parts in a body. You can never, ever, ever get there. There is a mismatch. The parts do not add up to the whole. There is some emergence. There is something else which enters. The parts, the whole is more than the parts. Somehow, all of these individual components end up producing something which is beyond the parts that went into it. In the same way that, like, you can't understand, like you can take all the individual muscle cells, right? The fiber. It doesn't really like you don't know what an arm is by looking at 1,000 chains of cells and tendons and things, right? Like the body, the muscular system of the body as a whole is greater than these individual parts, right? And so the book, it obviously in 1,400 pages talks about a lot that's more than that. But it is addressing like a sickness in the modern world that what we've talked about is it seeks to reduce everything down into its component parts, and as such loses the whole. It despirits, it unspirits the whole. It removes the spirit from, and it devitalizes. It's like you can't live that way. You can't know life. You can't live life. Um, and there's kind of phenomenological discussions of just like one of the fascinating I won't, I could talk about this book for hours. I'll do just one more thing. One of the fascinating pieces of evidence he does is um schizophrenia is essentially that quality cranked up to a 10 of reductionism. And so in the schizophrenic, you have the total reduction and atomization of everything. If you ask a schizophrenic to draw like a true deep, like really schizophrenic person to draw themselves. They draw themselves as parts. Their arm is not connected to their torso. Their leg is not connected. Their head is, they're atomized. There's no whole. And that is how they start to experience the world. So in a very real way, this modern reductionism of everything, we are teaching ourselves to be schizophrenic. We are, and it's like, have you ever navigated the world and you're talking to somebody and it's like they just can't, like there's just this plainly, directly obvious thing that, and we're having these social wars and cultural wars that it's like it's obvious. It's like it's right there. It's like you can't see it. That is this tendency of, it's like there's this obvious plain as day thing, which is perceptually real. And yet there's this analytical reason why what you're seeing isn't true. It's like, well, actually all of this theory into like blah, blah, blah. Like that is this tension that we are living through right now. And this book is, I think, just the most incredible antidote. I would literally call it an antidote to that.
And you said it was The Matter with Things?
Yeah, the matter with things. And it's a joke, right? It's
Right.
matter things. Like it is, and it, you know, I kind of went on at the beginning of this thing of like this, that matter, this belief that like matter is the only thing that exists. And when you get into this book, like you realize a lot of this is rooted in the very concept of what is the primacy of the stuff. Like, is this the deepest thing? Is this like ontologically, like, is this the realest thing? Or is there something realer than this? And how do we even ask that question? And that may sound to maybe someone in the audience as like a superfluous or like navel gazing. Like, what does that even mean? But what you'll realize is that modernity has supplied an answer to that question. So you may hear that question and think like, is that nonsense? Like, what does he mean? Like, what is realer? You live in a world which has already decided the answer to that question, regardless of if you think it's nonsense, and it is poisoning everything.
You know, that a lot of what you were just saying right there reminded me a lot of Alan Watts as well. And for anyone that's listening that's not familiar with Alan Watts, there are some shorter than 1,400 pages, if that's perhaps a little too ambitious. Now I'm curious. I'm going to order this though, because that sounds really fascinating. But that's one of the kind of core things that Alan Watts talked about, right? Is this need to dissect everything, this need to break everything apart and look how clever and smart we are by picking all this apart. You know, look at, we've figured out the most intimate ways that butterflies mate, instead of just saying, well, look at that beautiful butterfly.
Yes.
Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And so so The Matter with Things, who did you say the author was?
Ian McGilchrist. And you gave such a phenomenal example. Like, those are those two different modes. One wants to dissect the butterfly. The other is awed by the beauty of the thing itself, of the actuality, the thou in front of you. And like, those are those two modes, and each of us has both of those modes. One isn't good and the other is bad. And that's his argument. Like, these are both essential parts of brain function and humanity, but one makes a very poor master. And we have handed the keys to the kingdom to our dissecting analytical mind, and it has unsold the world. It has literally sucked. It has extracted. It has excised the soul from things in a profound way. Like, the world, when you were a child, the world was enchanted. It was experientially enchanted. There was a felt sense. This wasn't like a belief that you believed in magic or something. It was that you looked at the fucking trees and you felt that there was life there. There was a vibrancy and a realism to it. And And in previous human civilizations, in previous stages of human civilization, I'm not saying everyone was walking around experiencing the world as one does as a child, but the world was alive. It was enchanted. It had a soul to it. It was not dumb, inert stuff. And what this tendency has done is it has surgically extracted the soul from everything. And we live in an unensouled world, and everybody is miserable, and everyone is searching for something that is lost. They know that something is missing. They can't, it keeps them up at night. It is no matter how much money or success one achieves, there's this gnawing pit, this emptiness, and we live in an unenchanted world, and it's a profound problem, but it's one that like one can remedy in oneself. You don't need the world to change. Like it would be great if it did, but like the solution is inside oneself. It is you can literally look and interact with the world in a different way. Anyways,
No, I love that because I was going to ask you, for those who feel that gnawing pit, how would you recommend that they try to fill it? Is it just by trying to experience, and not to use a cliche, but to be present? Because the present is all we have. And that may sound contradictory to the low time preference, think about the future.
yeah,
But I don't find it so at all.
yeah, no,
It means that you are appreciating the time that you have now and making sure you make the most of it. That is how you best prepare yourself for the future, is by being present. Paradoxically so, I think.
absolutely right. I think that is the right answer, and I'll just expound on it a little bit. Life only occurs here. There's nothing else. There's no other like those other moments they don't have experiential reality. They're not really real. Um, you're like, you can't fill that hole. That's the trap. That's the false promise, the siren song of the modern world, is that you can fill that emptiness with stuff and things and power and money and status and prestige. And you can't. It's like a Chinese finger trap. Every attempt to fill it makes it worse or aggravates it. Um, it is like the solution is actually in the stopping to try to fill it. And this doesn't mean like a paralyzed give upness. It is like it is just encountering the moment, encountering. And when I say encountering, I mean something substantial, something with that is experience, that is tangible, like coming into contact with uh oneself, the moment, the lived reality of what one feels like in this moment, in the next moment. Like it's revitalizing. Like it's we're taught to live and like in this abstracted, far away, like people, like we literally are taught that like we are our minds, like that we are like the content of our minds. And we live in this way where we're obsessed with whatever is running through our heads at that moment. But like, you can focus on that, but like there's also experience itself. There's your sense perceptions, there's the world around you, there's just that lived reality. And I think the antidote is just putting your attention to that lived reality. And that's like the sum total of all meditation practices the world over, in one way or another, are at least in a large part saying that you need to divert attention from the runaway circus of mind and restore it to just um what is actually here, what is actually real, which is whatever is present. And like that is, experientially, like it's just a gradual process of like we're addicted to We're addicted to this abstraction, this endless, disassociative thinking. And we never come home. We never come home to reality, like the lived felt substance. And so it's no surprise that our society like completely discounts, well, what do you mean you know it's true? What do you mean you feel that it's right or wrong, right? Because they're so disassociated from just reality, like literally reality. Everything is analysis. And yeah, that, I mean, that is, in a one answer, that is the answer.
It's a beautiful answer, and I think a beautiful note to end on. And I will say that this lived reality, this being in the present with you, has been a present to me, quite a gift. I've enjoyed this very much. Last thing I'll say is just anywhere you want to send people. I'll link to your Twitter and your Nostr, but anything else that people should check out, go for it. This has been quite a treat, Steven.
No, this has been awesome. Yeah, contact me on Twitter, Steven Lubka. You're not going to be able to spell my handle.
It'll be in the show notes for that reason.
In the show notes. But yeah, like my DMs are always open. I love interacting with everybody on Twitter. If you want to reach me there. Yeah, I work for Swan. You want to do Bitcoin things, come to Swan.
All right. Well, I appreciate this because, your time is scarce and Bitcoin is scarce, but Bitcoin podcasts are abundant. So thank you for sharing your scarce time to come on another fucking Bitcoin podcast. And looking forward to seeing you in the flesh and experiencing the present together in person again soon.
Yes, absolutely, sir. Pleasure. This was wonderful.
And that's a wrap on this Bitcoin Talk episode of the Bitcoin Podcast. If you are a Bitcoin-only company interested in sponsoring another fucking Bitcoin podcast, head to bitcoinpodcast.net or hit me up on social media. On Nostr, head to primal.net/Walker. And on Twitter, search for @WalkerAmerica or @TitcoinPodcast. You can also watch the video version of this show on X or on YouTube by going to youtube.com/@WalkerAmerica or Rumble by searching for @WalkerAmerica. Bitcoin is scarce. There will only ever be 21 million, but Bitcoin podcasts are abundant. So thank you for spending your scarce time to listen to another fucking Bitcoin podcast. Until next time, stay free.